Okay, the Trump sentencing. I didn't realize there was it's so amazing. They released the audio. They haven't had an audio released from this entire trial throughout. But when it's time for the prosecutor to lambaste Trump and accuse him of violating the Constitution, when it comes for Judge Merchan, I hadn't heard his voice before, come up and say, be holier than thou in his sentencing, then they release the audio. Unconditional discharge basically means zero consequences, except he's living with the confirmed status of convicted felon, which is all that it was about. And when I say confirmed status, that's what the prosecutor said. He deserves, this is to cement or solidify his status as a convicted felon, which is all that they wanted. So first questions first. I know you'd mentioned it earlier. The fact that it's an unconditional discharge with no meaningful penalty in terms of a sanction, that makes it harder or slows down the process to appeal in that there's no urgency to appeal it?
Well, exactly what I said is what happened. That because Merchan put in his earlier order last week that he was unlikely to issue any incarceration sentence, that's what the higher courts relied upon for saying we don't have to get involved now. They're like, oh, he's already said he's going to do just a discharge, so there's no consequence. There's no consequence we have to get in front of. We can just take it through the regular appellate chain. Now, the four conscientious constitutional conservatives on the bench, on the Supreme Court, recognized that was inadequate. The shenanigans themselves were a disgrace to the rule of law and a danger to the incoming president. And that's why Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh said they would have stopped the criminal conviction right away to re-examine just the insanity of that entire case. And unsurprising to some of us, surprising to some of the rubes out there, Justice Amy Coney Barrett was the justice to screw Trump again and to allow the lawfare to march on again. As we talked about, we were, I think, the only people warning, and Alex Jones did too, about Barrett. Said Barrett's not a reliable, trustworthy choice on constitutional issues. Her professional background, her resume, her CV, her biography all scream she's a wannabe Justice Roberts. And I got so much crap from so many people on the right who had deluded and denuded themselves into thinking that she was the next Scalia. And it's like there's nothing in her background that says she's going to be the next Scalia. Just look at her actual decisions while she was on the bench. They were horrendous. She, green-lit the Jacobson decision. She approved of lockdowns. She approved of forcing vaccines on people. She thought Jacobson, which was one of the worst decisions ever issued in the history of the Supreme Court, was one of its best decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. She came from the corporate Southern aristocracy, the same corporate Southern slave-holding aristocracy that, they made sure that the black Republican gubernatorial nominee in North Carolina got smeared on the eve of the election so he couldn't win because they don't want a black man to be governor. That's who these people are. That's who they've always been. They are corporatist establishment hacks. She's deferential to the Catholic Church. So, yeah, you'll get a good decision on abortion. She's okay on gun control, so you'll get some decent decisions on gun issues. It will be a split, and that's what she's been. In all of these other contexts, everything about Barrett screamed she was going to be the next Roberts. And every conservative who vouched for her, who attacked me and others, should be apologizing. They should be out there on the social media saying, golly gee, we got it wrong again. That the Federalist Society doesn't know what the hell they're doing, or they don't care about conservative principles. They care about institutional establishment interest. They will be the first to defend the FBI and the CIA and the NSA. The fact that Barrett had the chutzpah to defend this absolutely outrageous actions by the state court judge. And again, Dershowitz has called it an embarrassment to the rule of law. Jonathan Turley, Professor Turley at George Washington University, another Democrat, called it an embarrassment to the rule of law. Fetterman, Senator John Fetterman, said it was a joke. And yet Amy Coney Barrett can't figure that out. And is it a coincidence that, remember, she was also the key judge who made sure that nothing took place towards big tech during the election? She was the one that said, well, we don't have clear evidence that the government's forcing any kind of censorship going on here, because Amy Coney Barrett is a liar, big fat liar. She took that $2 million bribe in the book deal that she got. to be the future Justice Roberts, had her people leak to Politico how eager she was to be the future Justice Roberts, how she was shoving it to those Thomas supporters and shoving it to those conservatives who are stupid enough and suckers enough and saps enough to vouch for and vote for her, including President Trump himself, who got taken for a ride by his so-called conservative allies. But everybody on social media should be, that vouched for and that attacked the rest of us, should be apologizing. Why do you keep getting it wrong when it comes to judges? Over and over and over and over again. You thought Roberts was going to be this great conservative jurist. You thought Kennedy was going to be this great conservative jurist. Anthony Kennedy. All you do is get it wrong. Get it wrong, get it wrong, get it wrong. Maybe just don't even give advice in the future, because she has been one of the worst nominees, and one of the worst decisions President Trump made in his entire administration was Amy Coney Barrett, and she proved it once again to him directly and in person.
It was a one-page decision. It was very simply put. It basically said, given that Merchan has announced his intention to give an unconditional discharge, there's minimal risk for Trump, and so we're not going to intervene. It's such a legally untenable position, because they admit that there would be exposure if the judge were to do something different, but they're going to go on the judge's, basically stated intent not to do something stupid. But they're acknowledging that in law there's a problem, but to the extent that in fact there's no risk, we're not going to get involved. And it was one page, and she signed off on it. How the hell?
It was her decision. She was the one that, if she hadn't made that decision, that case would have ended, and that lawfare would have ended, and Trump wouldn't have had to go through any of it anymore. And it's just an embarrassment as to who and what she is, and she's going to continue to be that. But I mean, I've considered the irony. It's the same week that Zuckerberg proves that she lied in the record. Oh, no, Facebook wasn't being ordered by the government to do anything. And Zuckerberg goes on Joe Rogan and goes, oh, yeah, we were being ordered to do things, just like Children's Health Defense and Robert Kennedy had alleged. And so Amy Coney Barrett's willing to lie about facts to cover for big tech. That's who she is. Everybody who vouched for her will be like, I'm so confused because you didn't pay attention. That's why. Because you didn't do your due diligence. That's why.
And I can't take your knowledge on this. We were discussing it, but primarily you were discussing it. And you had the insights. When it comes to Zuckerberg, though, and his recent revelations and his recent about face, I know that he's saying that. I'm skeptical. I think he was a lot more of a willing participant than a coerced individual.
Sure, but this didn't work out. Now, I think on the flip side, I've said all along about Zuckerberg, he's not political. He cares about money, unlike some others. After 2016. People forget Soros went after him. Soros was trying to short the stock, trying to wage war on him. That's when he suddenly was like, oh, okay, I'll go along with whatever you want on the elections. I'll go with whatever you want on censorship, whatever you want on COVID. And I agree with you. He was, he went along with it full scale, knowing it was wrong. His belated, golly, gee, I wish I wouldn't have done it is all bogus. It just didn't work out the way. It temporarily worked for him in that it backed Soros off. Soros quit harassing Facebook. But in the end, it got him a lot of enemies. And he looks at Musk and he's like, I'd rather be where Musk is at than be where I was at. And so I think what he's saying now is sincere in that he wants out of this mess. I think he never wanted to be in the middle of the mess because he's just a greed freak more than anything else. But I agree with you. He was much more culpable and complicit than he's now letting on.
I think he's a greed freak, but I also think, my theory is he's just wildly jealous of Elon. What do you make of the fact that he put now Dana White on the board of Meta, Facebook?
Well, that's a smart move on his part. Peter Thiel, who was on the board of Facebook, tried to speak out and he was ignored. And now he sees that Peter Thiel, David Sachs, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, they're in like Flint with the Trump administration. And he's out, and he's on the outs. That's why he's like, okay, I've got to. Also, CHD, Children's Health Defense, had brought another suit detailing all the ways he had violated their rights. So what he can do is restore Children's Health Defense and Robert Kennedy's accounts to Instagram and Facebook immediately. Prove you're legit. If you're legit, if this isn't just a weak political move to try to buy cover with Trump by misleading Trump into thinking you're not going to be the prick that you've been the last decade, that you weren't complicit in stealing an election. I mean, if there's anybody who's involved in stealing an election, it's Zuckerberg from 2020. He would be one of the top suspects if we were to do a meaningful investigation of what really happened in 2020. So if he wants cover and immunity from all that, then he better start with action, not just words about, golly gee, we're not going to censor anymore. Okay, restore Children's Health Defense account fully to Facebook and Instagram. Restore Robert Kennedy's account, who's going up to be nominated for Secretary of Health and Human Services immediately, to Instagram and Facebook, to the others that were critics. There's a bunch of people in the vaccine injured community who created communities on Facebook that got shut down. Restore them ASAP. So let's see if he's legit. He's going to have a chance to prove he's legit. I think the skepticism about him is well warranted. And if he thinks he's going to get out of Dodge with just some loose words on Rogan, he's wrong.
Well, it's interesting. He's got a lot of self-serving reasons above and beyond financial, but exposure legally to say, I didn't do this voluntarily. I was coerced into doing it, because we now know definitively that he censored, and wrongly, even according to his own admission, the people who were suing him. Children's Health Defense, John Stossel, Candace Owens, they were suing him for these very reasons. He seems to have admitted it out loud, but passing the buck and saying I was extorted or coerced into doing it by the government, and therefore I lack the mens rea. Although we're talking civil cases, it didn't cover his ass mode, but I think he's wildly jealous of Elon Musk.
Question. Well, because he's a he's an ego freak, not power freak, but ego freak.
Yeah,
and the money freak and ego freak. That's what drives that's my read on Zuckerberg, always has been. And his wife is ideological, so he was eager to get on the good graces of the would-be big tech oligarchs, and it just didn't work, because a lot of what happened was Trump beat him, and so the smart oligarchs jumped sides to Trump, and Zuckerberg's just a little late to the party. He should have jumped sides 6 months ago. I mean, the other thing with Facebook, you have access to incredible data. His data probably showed him that Trump was going to win, because you can use the face.
Well, I mean, that's how people were rumoring that Elon was calling the election before the mainstream media was calling it, because he knew with internals that Trump had won. I mean, that Trump was going to win.